Sketch the graph of the following functions by hand. Explain what the values of a and b tell you about this graph. Part A, we're given f of x is equal to 4 times 5 to the x. So to graph this exponential function, I'm going to first create a table of values that will give me several points, and I'll plot those points to get a general idea of the shape of the graph. So we have x versus f of x. Now I'm going to start with 0, and then we'll go back and get a couple other points. But let's start with 0. If x is 0, I have 4 times 5 to the 0. 5 to the 0 is 1, and so that just leaves 4. If x is 1, I have 4 times 5 to the first. 5 to the first is 5, and 4 times 5 is 20. If x is 2, I have 4 times 5 to the second. 5 to the second is 25, and so I have 4 times 25, which is 100. If x is 3, I have 4 times 5 to the third, which ends up being 500. And if x is 4, I have 4 times 5 to the fourth, which is 2,500. Now we're given a grid here, and we're given some scale. And so some of these points are going to be tough to plot. Notice this marks 500, so that means that this is 250 here. So it's going to be kind of tough to plot some of these points, but we'll do our best. I'm going to plot 3 500 first. That's the easiest point to plot. And then 4 2500 isn't too difficult. 2 100 would be about here. 120 would be about here, and 4 would be about here. Now what if we had a negative x value? So how about negative 1? Then we'd have 4 times 5 to the negative first. Well, recall that 5 to the negative first is 1/5, so that's 4 times 1/5, which is 4/5. Smaller than 1, and so even lower. And if x was negative 2, we'd have 4 times 5 to the negative second, which is 4 times 1/25, 4/25, which is 0.16. So again, very close to 0. So now connecting, going through these points, drawing a curve that goes through these points, I'll do my best here. We get a curve that looks like this. Notice how it is very flat on one side, and it's increasing rapidly after, at some point. It begins to increase rapidly. So there's the graph. Now it asks us also to explain what the values of a and b tell you about this graph. So it's referring to the general form f of x is equal to a times b to the x. So what, the a is 4 and the b is 5. So when a is greater than 0 and b is greater than 1, the graph is above the x-axis and increases. I'm given another one. 800 times 3/4 to the x. So again, I'll set up a table of values here. And like before, I'm going to start with 0. 3/4 to the 0 is 1, right? So we have 800 times 3/4 to the 0 power. 3/4 is 0 is 1, and so that just leaves the 800. If x is 1, we have 800 times 3/4 to the first power. And if you need to use a calculator for that, this is fun. That would give us 600. If x is 2, we would have 800 times 3/4 to the second power. And 3/4 of 600 is 450. If x is 3, similar process, you would get 337.5. And if x is 4, you'll get about 253. What if x is negative 1? Well, then that would be 800 times 3/4 to the negative 1, which is 800 times 4/3, which is approximately 1067. All right, so we have some points here. Let's go ahead and graph them. Looking at our scale is by ones on the x and by hundreds on the y. So let's see, we have negative 1, 1067 would be about there. 0, 800. 1, 600. 2, 450. 3, 337.5. Oh, that one's bad. Sorry. 337.5 would be about there. 4, 253. So we have some points here. Let's get another point that's a little bit further out. How about if x was 10? I'll use a calculator here. If x was 10, then we would have 800 times 3/4 to the 10th power. So bringing up the calculator, 800 times 3/4 to the 10th power is about 45. So 10, we're all the way down here. All right, and again, let's try and draw a smooth curve through these points. So come up here somewhere and trying to draw a smooth curve. And notice again, it would have to sort of flatten out. So again, notice here we have a flatter part, and here we have a rapid decrease. It's decreasing the whole way, but towards the end it sort of flattens out. And so there's the graph. Now again, it asks us, explain what the values of a and b tell us about the graph. And again, it's referring to the general form f of x is equal to a times b to the x. All right, so here's what we know. If a is positive and b is between 0 and 1, then the graph is above the x-axis and decreasing.